All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are going to unpack one of the most unbelievable financial frauds of our time. It's a story about a tech superstar, a meteoric rise, and a lie so massive it literally brought an entire empire crashing down. Welcome to the story of Wirecard. Just take a second to look at this number. 1.9 billion euros. That's about 2 billion US dollars. This was the amount of cash that this hugely successful company, Wirecard, told everyone, investors, auditors, the whole world, was just sitting there, safe and sound, in their trust accounts. This number was everything. And then, in June of 2020, the bombshell dropped. The company put out a statement admitting that, that 1.9 billion euros, they couldn't find it. And the reason they couldn't find it was because, and this is a direct quote from the company itself, it simply didn't exist. Poof, it was a ghost. And look, this wasn't some shady startup we're talking about. This came from a celebrated German tech company, a titan of the industry. So when this statement came out, it wasn't just a shockwave, it was a cataclysm that led to the company's total and immediate collapse. So that really is the main question, right? How on earth does this happen? How can a company that was the poster child for European tech, a company that was supposed to be the future of finance, have a $2 billion hole in its balance sheet? As we're about to find out, that money wasn't lost. It was never even there in the first place.
To really get how big the fall was, you've got to understand the rise. Because Wirecard's journey to the top was, honestly, a masterclass in telling a story everyone wanted to believe.
The company actually started out in the early 2000s in a pretty sketchy part of the internet, processing payments for gambling and adult websites. But over the next 20 years, it pulled off this incredible transformation. It got a banking license, it expanded all over the globe, and then in 2018, it did the unthinkable. It kicked a 148-year-old bank off Germany's most elite stock index, the DAX 30. This was so much more than just a business success. It felt like a national victory. Wirecard became the symbol of European tech innovation. It was proof that the continent could take on Silicon Valley. Investors poured billions into it, and politicians held it up as this champion of the new economy. Everybody wanted in on the story. So, they built the reputation, they had the trust, they had all the prestige. But behind the curtain, how were they actually constructing this lie? Well, it all came down to creating this kind of shadow business, a super complex illusion happening in faraway places, all designed to hide one simple and pretty shocking fact. This slide right here just lays it all out. The gap between what people thought was going on and what was really happening is just staggering. On the one hand, you've got this profitable, game-changing giant with tons of cash. And on the other, a company just making up huge parts of its business in a long-running scheme to fool absolutely everyone. And their playbook? It wasn't some kind of super complex financial wizardry. Nope. It was a classic con, built on some pretty simple ideas. First, you tell an amazing story. For Wirecard, it was all about being a German tech hero taking over Asia. Second, you create a business that's so complicated that it's nearly impossible for anyone to actually check your work. And this was the heart of the fraud. They claimed a huge chunk of their money came from these mysterious partners in Asia. In reality, these partners were a complete fiction, just a web of shell companies used to invent revenue. Third, you use your amazing reputation to bat away any questions. And finally, you just systematically lie to the very people who are supposed to be the watchdogs, handing them forged documents and fake bank statements to prove the phantom money was real. Which, of course, brings us to the most disturbing question in this whole mess. This fraud didn't happen overnight. It went on for years. There were journalists, there were investors raising red flags. So how did the official watchdogs, the experts, the entire system, just miss it? And when I say watchdogs, I mean everybody. Financial regulators in Germany, they just seem to accept the company's reports at face value. Big-name auditors, like EY, they literally signed off on these bogus accounts year after year after year. And the investors, big and small, they were just so in love with the growth story that they chose to ignore all the warning signs. It is the ultimate story of the emperor's new clothes, right? The story of success was so powerful, the company's reputation was so solid that almost nobody with any real authority was willing to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, something here is very, very wrong. They all just wanted to believe the emperor was wearing the finest suit they'd ever seen. So when this massive lie finally fell apart, what was the actual damage?
what's the real cost when a $2 billion phantom just vanishes into thin air?
The cost was just immense. First off, you have billions of dollars in savings from regular investors that were just wiped out, gone overnight. Second, it was a huge black eye for the reputation of Germany's entire financial system. But maybe the biggest cost of all was the shattered public trust in the very institutions, the auditors, the regulators, whose entire job is to stop this kind of thing from ever happening.
And let's just be crystal clear on this one last time. That $2 billion wasn't misplaced. It wasn't lost in some bad investment. It was a phantom. It was completely made up, just conjured out of thin air to sell a story, to pump up a stock price, and to keep a massive lie going.
And all of that leaves us with a really unsettling question. See, the Wirecard scandal isn't just about one crooked company. It's a case study in a complete systemic failure. And if the experts, the watchdogs, and the entire financial establishment can be fooled on a scale this massive, it forces all of us to ask a tough question. Who can we really trust?